Doing it live.
Hello, everyone! Welcome back
Hi.
to Misty Mountain
Hey.
Streaming! Well, Fark, what is Fark? Eric?
Bark.
Eric is back in the chat, guys. Glad to have him here. Hello, though. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob, that's Dan, that's Ethan. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll do their introductions in a moment. Sorry for a bit of the late start. My computer doesn't want to record things right now. So we're actually not recording this, so I hope you're catching it live. Let's flip things up to Top Rob to say hello and start off the introductions.
Hey guys, as you know me, I am Rob, also known as Rob Prime. We're not surprised we're not running the Spelljammer game tonight because people are traveling to conventions. So I figured why not just get a group of dungeon masters and have a fun open conversation. So if you guys have questions for us tonight, start thinking on those and we'll see what we can do to answer them, because between the four of us there's quite a bit of experience, and you can exclude the top window because there's not a lot of experience there, but these three gentlemen, they can definitely help us with getting some answers and fun topics going. You can find me online on Twitch, it's Riflestud, but everywhere else it's Happy Nerd Photo. And I will throw it to Dan.
Hello. Hi. Oh my goodness, I had phlegm. Hello.
Right?
I'm Dan. I have been graciously invited into this DM panel, and here to have a good time, answer some fun questions, talk D&D stuff, and I run the Edge of Knowledge. I almost forgot the title of my own campaign.
We're off to a good start, guys.
Yes. I run the Edge of Knowledge every Tuesdays. We had missed yesterday because of storms and inclement weather. But we, bar none of the weather's all cleared up, which is what it's looking like next week, we'll be continuing back with that. And yeah, been playing D&D for, I think, about 6 years now.
Right on.
I think 6 years. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Ethan.
Hi, my name is Ethan. I am half of Thousand Faces cosplay.
So 500 Faces cosplay?
Honestly, that's being generous to me if you give me all 500. Lauren is at least 600. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 12, so 21 years. I am now a forever DM, and I'm about to start running my 4th concurrent campaign. So just finished a 2.5-year long campaign. So we have one homebrew in my homebrew world of Verd, and I'm also running Rima, the Frost Maiden, Curse of Strahd, and about to start Wild Beyond the Witchlight in April.
Do you consider yourself an overachiever when it comes to Dungeon Master?
I think masochism is the more accurate term.
Okay. So if you're not running 4 games at once, you're just not as cool as Ethan, is my understanding.
No, you just have like better life choices.
I will cap us off there. I'm Rob. If you're familiar with this channel, you have seen me before, along with these other two. I've been here since there has been a here. I run the Thursday night game, which is Search for the Spellforge, that is coming back from its hiatus tomorrow with one missing player, hopefully one additional player, and starting the March to GaryCon, which is up in that corner right there. We have graciously been invited. I'm just getting it up there for practice tonight. They don't know it's there yet. We are participating in the March to GaryCon, a series of independent streams building up to and looking forward to several live events, one of which I will be taking a personal part in for GaryCon this year, March 23rd to 26th. Looking very much forward to that. Before we go any further, hello to people in the chat. Mad Dog is here hanging out with us. The other 600 of Thousand Faces cosplay is in the chat. Good old Crash Candy Jane is hanging out with us. Hello. Eric is back from hospital hiatus. Thank you for being here,
Crash
bud.
Candy?
And if I've missed anyone, we are still glad that you are here. Thank you as well to Paradox Chaos Connection, which is what I should have said the last time I was doing thank yous. Now that I can see the whole name at once, it's much easier to see what it should have said. To Ashlexandra, to Taco B, and to Thousand Faces Cosplay for the follows. Thank you for joining our weird little corner of the internet. We are Misty Mountain Streaming. We like to tell and experience great stories, and we prefer to do that through tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. But tonight is about Dungeons and Dragons more so than the great stories. As Rob mentioned, this is a panel of dungeon masters, of players, of people at least passingly familiar with the game, if not just decadently obsessed with it. So, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. You can use the channel points to make sure that we see them. You can use the channel points to do some other things. We are here to talk, to hang out, to enjoy whatever beverages we enjoy, and to spend a little time with you guys. So with that, let's flip it up to Top Rob Prime, once again.
Prime. Okay, so I totally just spaced out on all my questions. I get kind of nervous whenever the camera's on, you know. But let's see. We've talked a little bit about games going. What is your favorite game that you have run?
Okay, let's. First of all, you should ask someone in particular that question, just so we don't all.
I'm not a moderator, okay?
Just so we don't all answer at once, or so that none of us answer. But are you asking like what system, like D&D or other systems, or like what adventure have you run?
I would say adventure. Do you? So I'll take it even a step further. If it's do you prefer running a pre-written adventure like Wild Beyond the Witchlight Spelljammer, or do you prefer doing homebrew?
Okay.
And if it is homebrew, just a quick synopsis of kind of where, like, of your favorite part of it, like what the story itself kind of is going towards, if that makes any sense.
I'm going to leave this to fate to decide who has to answer first. And according to the D8 divided by 2 that I just rolled, we're going to turn that to our guest, Ethan.
Hey! So I have run both modules and homebrew, and I think that both have their advantages and their disadvantages. I really hate when I see people try to have the spicy hot take of, if you run a module, you're not a real DM. And if you have run a 5e module, you know that running a 5e module is way harder than running homebrew, because they are not made to be run effectively. Running a Pathfinder 2 module, super easy. Running a 5e module is more work than coming up with it yourself. That said, like, I just finished Rise of Tiamat. That was a 2.5-year long campaign. The module itself, the experience that I got to have with the players, though, and the story that we ended up telling is one that they still talk about to this day, and that warms my heart. But right now, I am adoring Curse of Strahd. It is my favorite module in 5e that I've run. Oh, it's so good. It still takes a lot of work to make it coherent. And major shout out to, on Reddit, MandyMod, who did a lot of guides on how to improve Curse of Strahd, and it was really good advice. But I'm also running a homebrew in my homebrew world called Verd, and the thing that I love about that is it's a very water scarce and very harsh world. I have implemented a number of homebrew house rules to up the intensity of things, such as if you go unconscious, you get a point of exhaustion. If you get critted, you get a point of exhaustion. So, and using the new exhaustion rules where there are 10 levels and not 6. 6, that'd be brutal. But it's been really cool to see how the players have adapted to a much harsher, much more fatal world than the Forgotten Realms, for example. So yeah, those are the ones that I'm currently loving.
So let me ask you this: do you roll the death saving throws, or do you let your players roll them?
I have started rolling them myself, and I I've been doing that for the last year. And what I usually will do, because I like transparency in some respect, is I will call over a player who isn't the one who is dying to witness each individual save and tell them to keep a poker face. But it'll be a different one each time. So, the first person may see that it's a success, but they won't see what the second one
Oh,
is.
that's fun.
So they still don't have...
I like that.
They
And
don't have the full story.
And I gauging your reactions, I think a few of you have implemented this too, and I highly recommend it, because talk about increasing the feeling of intensity versus going, the rogue is down, but he's succeeded his first 2 death saves, so he's probably fine. We can leave him for a while, as opposed to, he's rolled twice! He could be one away from death! We don't know! And
Hey, one of them could have been a natural one. He could be dead already.
had that happen, man. It's beautiful. But yeah, I think that is a great house rule of rolling the death saves yourself.
I think, not that anyone asked my opinion, but I'm giving it for free.
What's your opinion on it?
So thank you for asking, Ethan. Gosh, thank God somebody did. There's a lot of mentality, especially that my brother brings to the table and that I've seen at different games, that, your hit points don't matter until you're out of them. Your death saves don't matter until your last one. And the cleric would rather go ahead and try and get the killing blow on the monster and then worry about who needs picking up. When that is not how, if we were the characters in that situation, would at all respond to one of our allies, one of our bosom friends, one of our chances of getting out of here alive being on the floor bleeding. Like that, there needs to be some immediacy, there needs to be some threat, there needs to be some sense of tension, and not knowing how well or poorly that's going is just the easiest way in the world to provide that.
I did like that, and I actually learned that from TikTok, because I just have tons of D&D TikToks that pop up, and Mad Dog Mike is one of the players in my current game, and he'll just walk around, because I work with him, and he'll walk around the corner, and he's like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it, everything's fine." Gotta build that intensity there.
We have had a redemption in the chat to roll off one against another, so grab a d20, and Dan, while we're doing so, why don't you favor us with your opinion, homebrew versus adventures, and what's your favorite?
Yeah, I think personally, that's a 4.
You doubled mine. Oh. So far, Ethan's
I was gonna use the other finger, but
good job, Ethan.
I'd say, from my own personal experience, I've played a lot more homebrew than I have modules. I think I only recently did modules when COVID had hit and we all went online. And, I was under the impression that they were easy. And so the very first one that I ran, I was like, well, let's do Tomb of Annihilation. I think that'd be a ton of fun.
Oh, sure.
Let's
run on a whole big continent. Why not?
And it's so much more work than it would be just to homebrew it and improv a lot of the stuff that is there, instead of just endlessly searching through I gotta find the page that talks about this specific thing. But yes, and I think I personally like homebrew because I think that there's a lot of active creativity that comes to it that I think, well, modules, they can be a lot of fun. They do have this sort of this very much if you're running if you're running Grime of the Frost Maiden, it's very much that, but it is just that setting, and there doesn't leave much room to what's outside of Icewind Dale. Well, you can't go that way without running into some problems, and so but I like that, and I think probably my favorite module would actually have to be Rime of the Frost Maiden, out of the ones that I have played through. Yeah, it's a lot of fun because it starts off as horror, I feel, and then turns into weird it turns into that sort of classic fantasy adventure styling. But I would recommend having like because I think I got like a DM's Guild expansion on that, and I think I would recommend supplementing that with the adventure because it makes the later half of the adventure worth it, I feel. If
I did the exact same thing for Rise
Yeah.
of Frostmaiden and found one of the fleshing out series,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, that's the thing, yeah, because like the module as on its own, if you don't add anything to it, there's no point in the later half of the module to go anywhere. If it's not, reworked in some way.
That is sort of my complaint with the written adventures as well. Because don't get me wrong, I like taking the pressure off of not having to come up with everything, of having kind of a roadmap to be able to read. But that book, let's pretend that people actually still buy the books. That book is your textbook for that adventure, and you might be missing information that really should have come up over here, but it wasn't printed until the back of the book, and you should have been able to tie them together if you knew everything. So then there's the pressure to read everything, and not only to read everything, but to remember everything. Thank you. I see that you have an actual book there. I went over Christmas. I ordered every book that I didn't have, and just to flex, just to have it on my YouTube set. And I haven't even used my YouTube set in pretty much a calendar year, so I don't know why I went and did that. But there's so much. There's a science to it, to running off of a pre-written adventure, whereas homebrew, it's just art. It's expressive. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, and no one can compare it to anything and say, oh, well, you did this better, or you did this worse, or you did this wrong. That's actually one of the reasons that I typically run in a homebrew adventure or a homebrew world, even instead of the Forgotten Realms, even instead of Dragon Age, even though I love the Dragon Age setting, or instead of Star Wars in the Fantasy Flight games, because I don't want someone to come to me and say, well, actually, that wouldn't be an X-Wing, that would be a Y-Wing, or they didn't have access to that technology at this point in the space age, or, any of that stuff. Like, you can't correct me on my world. And so out of fear, and under the guise of artistic expression, I typically prefer to run homebrew stuff. And I have run pre-written adventures, and if I had to pick, Curse of Strahd is just so sexy. That is so me.
I'm very intrigued by like the vampire. So I know nothing about the story. Like the only story that I've actually experienced is the Spelljammer, or not Spelljammer. I'm doing that now. Witchlight story that I ran for you guys. So like that, like when I say I'm new to D&D, I am new to D&D.
But I actually I want to pick up on that, where you were saying that you haven't gotten to experience those stories. And I do think that is one of the values of running modules, is shared experience across tables. Even comparing how, oh, you guys did it this way, that wiped us out. Getting to be able to, because like, take for example, a classic like first edition, Against the Cult of the Reptile God. Like everyone who played during those times would at one point have played that, and would at one point met the famously named and badly named bad guy in that one. So there was a shared experience across tables, and that is one of the values I think that does, even though things will be different, you'll change things up. Like for example, mine is not Curse of Strahd, it's Curse of Stradia, because I have a female vampire as the main, just to flip things around a little bit. But even with those small changes, those changes still contribute to the shared conversation and experience. Because like we were all sitting here before it started talking about Wild Beyond the Witchlight, because 3 of you have experienced it, I haven't. But then we get to talk about, oh, yours was different this way, how did you do that? And that's kind of cool.
That is really cool.
So that's kind of the video game mentality in a way. So Dan and Ethan, you're familiar with Curse of Strahd? So if I say Bone Grinder Windmill, and you see both of their eyes like, yeah, that thing. And Rob has no idea what we're talking about.
That sounds like a wrestling move,
right? But say
Bone Grinder.
I wish it was a wrestling move.
But if we have some shared experience through like a video game, like if anyone has played Dark Souls, and I say, oh, how did you handle the
Mhm.
Capra demon? You're like, oh,
Mm.
screw that guy. Holy crap, those dogs are just so unfair. And you kind of get to bond over those shared experiences, like Ethan is saying. So, yeah, there is value in that. And even when things change, like Stradia versus Strahd, you have a frame of reference of that's different because it's normally not that way. We have a question from the chat, by the by. Mad Dog Mom asks, can you combine the two types of the pre-written adventures and the homebrew? I think, Rob, you have some experience in this.
Absolutely. Yeah. With Witchlight, there was bits of that like we were talking before, that I was going off of the book. And my big thing that I do, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that does this, but I like to do the rule of cool. So if you can make it make sense if your character would do that, I'm 100% okay with it. As long as it makes sense. You can't be a barbarian casting fireball. It just doesn't work. But like, as we were going to one of the first zones, and if you haven't watched the VODs, sorry, spoiler alert, cover your ears. There's a tower that in the book it's written there's some snakes guarding it, and like it's like, okay, well, at that time we were ending the session. I was like, okay, well, maybe I can see if they want to like take shelter there for the evening as it's starting to get dark. And they did, and that gave me a whole week. I was like, this tower seems so prevalent to the game, but there's really nothing to it. How can I make this interesting and maybe make an extra session out of it, have them explore? And that's how we came up with Tess's Tickle Tower, and like a whole NPC that was like just created for it that I got to bring back later in the game. It was a lot of fun, and it's one of my favorite memories in that game as a whole. Like, it's still, we make jokes about.
I have many questions regarding that for later.
Mistress Tickles.
It's all in the name.
But so yeah, I absolutely I feel like it also allows you, like Rob had mentioned earlier, it allows you to add in your own bits and pieces and create a piece of art. Like, there's nothing saying that it's like, okay, yeah, we're taking this book and we're doing this, but we're gonna twist it and make it our own, because at the end of the day, it's make believe and we're telling a story and everyone's having fun, and that's the big part for me. Is I just want everyone to have fun and tell a cool story. What about you, Dan?
I agree. I think always it's always good to mix both of them, because like anytime you're just running strictly by the module, you at some point there's just going to be a gap. And the gap is whether or not you will see the gap at first or it'll happen in play. Like, I think one good example, and it came from like Rime of the Frost Maiden, where we had got hung up on this one detail where, because like in Rime of the Frost Maiden, it's like important how long certain distance are to certain areas, because that's important because there's time limits on a lot of stuff where there's certain.
Are you talking about?
Not that.
Okay.
But in the early part, we're like traversing through the towns. There's like a description of like it takes 2 hours to get to this town from this town, or it takes 4 hours from here to here, right? And it's like they had the option to have like sled dogs, where you can have like just a group of sled dogs that are like taking you the way, and it's like it cuts your distance in half. But then they put a note in there that says the sled dogs have to take a rest partway through, and it has to last this long. So at the end of it, you're like, well, it's the exact same time. It doesn't matter if I walk or take the sled dogs. It's the same time no matter what. So what's the point?
I can
right?
drive from town to town, but it's got to be in a park for at least an hour somewhere on that
exactly.
trip.
And so such a tiny gap like that, it's like, well, you got to just bend the rules a little bit. You got to say, well, maybe they travel faster, or maybe the time to get there is like less so, and that's just like a small example. But like there's so many of that can occur within a module where at some point you just have to fill in those gaps and just say like, well, maybe it's more so like this, or it's more so like that, or sometimes you'll have an event where a player will unanimously become the richest person in all of the Forgotten Realms because of one roll on a D100. So crazy stuff.
And just carrying off of that, in that 2.5-year Rise of Tiamat game, some of the most memorable things that happened, not in the module, not even a little, and not just because the players did something I expected, but just took it in a direction. They had this connection with this NPC, so let's delve into that more than the module deals with, And I know I mentioned this before, but have any of you run modules that weren't 5e, like for any other system, a module? Because, and this isn't to poop on the those, but I find those to be more DM patchwork intensive than some other modules, even like 4e 3.5, but like Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu. I find myself having to do a lot more work in fixing those little gaps in some 5e modules than I have to in some others. But so it goes.
I have read modules with intent to run them. But,
Does that count?
Yeah, it's like, can that get me a pass? Actually, one of my favorite, you guys, for the chat or for you guys, one of my favorite YouTube channels to watch is Seth Skorkowski. And if you don't know who that is, he is an author who spends most of his free time running Call of Cthulhu and tabletop role-playing games that are not D&D, and some even more specifically adult ones like Cult, Divinity Lost, and the like. And he will go through and he will review exclusively modules that he has run from these things and tell you what it did give you and what it didn't give you and what he would change, and he will sometimes provide you with the things that he feels like it's lacking. And I just live vicariously through Seth. Seth is running and playing games that I wish I was running and playing in. Were I to have the time to do those things and the players interested in doing them, which coming up later in the year perhaps I shall.
I'll play. I'll play.
Okay, I got one. This is the first time I'm talking about it on stream. I am looking at creating a second thing that I run each week here on the channel, specifically with the intent that it is not 5e. And I'm eyeballing Cthulhu pretty hard. Which your Discord name makes me think maybe you enjoy Cthulhu a little bit.
I'm a bit of a fan. H.P. Lovecraft is a POS, but I really like some of his stories.
You know what? People say that about J.K. Rowling. So don't hate the work for the author.
H.P. Lovecraft is up here. He was not a good human being.
No, he was
but
awful.
Cthulhu is such a fun system.
Yes. Which was not created by H.P. Lovecraft, by the way. Let's be clear.
No money goes to him because he's quite dead.
Quite dead. Last we checked, as far as we know. Anyway, that was a complete tangent. Hello in the chat, by the way, to TD's Idea Machines. Saw, dudes. Saw.
But I do love the Call of Cthulhu system. I think it's such a great one, and once you've played through it once, I think it alters your thinking as a player, because in Call of Cthulhu,
your sanity. Yeah.
Right, there are like 2 win states, and that is you don't die and you don't end up insane. That's victory.
Yeah, it's not save the princess, get the girl, get the magic item, kill the dragon. It's just I made it with most of me intact.
Yeah. They used to have a joke that the most overpowered build in Call of Cthulhu was a person in a coma. I can't go anywhere. I can't get hurt. No one can talk to me. I'm safe.
So that actually takes me to my next question is, now that I would say since, COVID hit, I think tabletop RPGs really picked up in popularity because nerdom as a whole has really picked up over the past, 10 years or more. But tabletop RPGs have picked up, and now you're starting to see all of these other writers and developers. And I know that there was the OGL drama that went on, a month ago, 2 months ago, however long it was. But how do you guys feel about other systems? Like, I saw one at a local game store the other day for Power Rangers that I want to play in. Like, that sounds like so much fun because you go through it and you literally create your own Power Ranger and your Megazord, but you have to have a game master that can come up with these adventures of, these snarky teenagers fighting monsters to stop Rita Repulsa from taking over the world. But I'm just in a Power Ranger kick right now lately. But
I
there's
saw
also
your minis.
Oh yeah, they're back there. But there's a Star Trek one too, and I was like, okay, that could be really cool as well. But it's like, with me being as new as I am, I don't feel like I have the experience to really, like, I would almost need someone to hold my hand because I've played twice. Like, I don't have that experience, and I want to get into it, but it's one of those, like, is this a good one? Is this not a good one? Like,
If I may answer
Absolutely,
that question,
yeah.
at least from my opinion. First of all, there are a ton of other systems that are incredibly rules light. Like, the character sheet is a just like fill in dots. Pick one of these three things. Pick one of these three things. Pick one of these three things. It only uses D6s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like, there are some incredibly rules light and incredibly crunchy systems. I've read way more systems than I've played, but I've played, I think I was just counting, I think I've actually played games in 8 or 9 systems. And they all have their value. They all have things that could probably be improved. But I'm a big fan of playing other systems, because if you don't try out, it's kind of like if you only ever ate at McDonald's ever, you wouldn't necessarily know what was good or lacking about that food because you don't have a point of comparison. And you may if you try something other than 5e, you may come back to it and go like, God, I missed this 5e feature.
Mm-hmm.
Or come back and go, huh? I'm not so sure about this anymore now that I've tried something different. So I think that's good.
It's hard to say that you love something to the exclusion of all else when you haven't tasted all else.
Fair.
Yeah, I say more the merrier. I think in any context of just when it comes to, like, any, whether it be gaming space, art, anything of that nature, right? I say the more variety the better, because when there's more of something, there's, you get a lot more dynamic systems, you get a lot more dynamic styles of play, you get a better understanding of just tabletop RPG in general, both in terms of, like, because, like, what you can learn from one system will make you a better player or a better GM in another system, right? And you could see some certain, like, rules and stuff that you really like, and I say, the more stuff that there is, the better it is for anything. And so, yeah, bring on the systems. I think the only other few systems one that I had played was Monster of the Week, which is very rules light. That one's a ton of fun, and that one's really easy to pick up. It's all D6s, and you can make a character in, like, less than, like, 15 minutes. Pretty simple, and super rules light. But a lot of good stuff out there.
I think if I can jump in on it, this is going to be a very adventurous month for me in terms of not D&D games, because I'm going to be playing the Alien RPG at GaryCon, which I've never touched before. Playotic Games is in the chat. I'm going to be playing my second ever session of Call of Cthulhu on their channel this coming Sunday. I dropped a link to their Twitch channel in the chat a moment ago. If you're watching live, you can click that and know when they're live, follow them, and see when we're gearing up to embarrass myself over there this Sunday. But there's also a lot of games that I haven't gotten to try yet that I'm very interested in. I played a little bit of the Fate Core system years ago, and that was fun. I love stuff by Evil Hat. I've been watching the Oxventurers Guild play through Blades in the Dark, which is also by Evil Hat, which is a heist-themed system that it's very tied to its setting, which I wish weren't the case because, again, I like to play in my own spaces, but some modifying could fix that neatly. Dread is perhaps the RPG system that I am most excited to play, but it is virtually impossible to play online because rather than rolling any dice or drawing any cards or doing anything such as that, you take blocks out of a Jenga tower every time you want to do something, and a character dies when the tower falls over. It is
Wow.
so, like, any of you
That
guys
sounds
want to
like-
come to my house? I bought Jenga specifically for this RPG, and no one is around me to play this, and it's so crazy.
That seems an aptly named game system then.
If you have come up in RPGs watching like Geek and Sundry and know some of the a little bit more old school celebrities in the space like Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton plays a game of Dread with Laura Bailey and a couple of other luminaries in the space from about 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was just called Tabletop was the show on YouTube and on Twitch, and you can Google Dread Tabletop and see some people like genuinely flipping out as they have to steady their hand to pull from the Jenga tower because a werewolf is
Insane.
chasing them. It's just
That's
Like
that.
nuts.
Oh my gosh.
That sounds like a hell of a night.
right.
Just didn't know if you saw there was a highlighted question in the chat.
Let's have a look. That is good old Eric. It sounded like you were gearing up to say something, Rob, before I interrupted you, and then I will ask that.
No, you're good. Keep going.
I think I interrupted, my bad.
Oh, no, you don't. Eric's question was, are there any apps or third-party tools that we enjoy using? And I assume the answer is yes. Or do you have any favorites, or do you completely ignore them? I doubt anyone in the modern age runs just off pen and paper and the player's handbook anymore. So, since Rob didn't get so much input on the last one, other than Twitch and Stream Elements and Discord, is there anything that you use to make your life as a dungeon master a little bit easier?
There is a website that I stumbled upon that I don't want to mention out loud because I don't want it to get shut down. It has every adventure module in it, so whenever I'm running games, I have multiple tabs open on another browser.
I'm gonna message you because I think I know which one this is.
Yep.
I just want to confirm.
So I use that because I can, in my brain, instead of going, oh, squirrel, I can kind of keep everything somewhat on track by being like, okay, here's this part specifically, like here's the combat of this part, here's the stat blocks of the monsters, like this is what I need right here. And then, be like, okay, well, here's the story pieces. And like when we're running through Witchlight, it wasn't uncommon to have 10 tabs pulled open because, I was just bouncing around on top of having the physical book in front of me, like, and my notepad and everything. But yeah, that's, let me see. Yep, that's exactly it. So,
Could you guys
Fair
send
play
that
to
to
you.
me so I avoid that website?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me know what support that.
I
You
don't
wanna
want you to
avoid
go
it.
there. I hear it's pretty shady.
God.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Lots of prawn.
Yeah, look, good old D&D Beyond has so much of my money. It'd be a shame if there were a way to circumvent having to spend all that.
Dude, the amount of money I have given Wizards of the Coast. I mean, I started playing Magic the Gathering when I was like 6.
Oh god! Like at this point, I should have just bought stock in the company. Like it would have been better for me in the long
I
run.
really wish that, and maybe it'll come down the road later, but I like having the physical books just as like a collector item, right?
Mhm.
Why can we not get a code or a discount code for when we buy the physical book? Here's a digital version of it as well, or
Money.
here's 50% off the digital because you bought the physical.
It is.
You got it in
it is a
one.
common
They don't
complaint.
want
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't want that.
I know.
Why on earth
Because they got
would-
people like that Rob that'll buy both.
Hey,
No,
I've
not even
got
that.
I've got that single middle class American guy money. So no, there's no calls upon my money except my hobbies.
Hey, I'm all for, spending some money to get some stuff. And funny enough, like even though that, website it does have access to all of that stuff, I still find myself like buying some of the books even after, like, it's because the website is cool and stuff like that. But even when I think I remember one time, because I had looked through that site and I found and I was looking for just a one shot, because some players had had to cancel, and I was like, well, I don't want to continue with the main campaign, but I want something to play. And it's don't know. And I think I pulled up the Rick and Morty dungeon and read through all of that, and I still ended up buying it on Roll20 for us to use and for us to go through and stuff. So I think
and I guess
sites like that
part
still
of
helps.
it is absolutely, I bought the physical version. This is just a digital, allowing me to multitask,
Yeah.
I want to support the creators and the artists and the writers, but I mean, having one physical book versus having 10 tabs is, there's especially when it comes to running it live on stream. Nobody in an audience wants to sit here and I see, oh yeah, hold on, let me flip to this page here. It's I can quickly hear, I can control F, I can search exactly what I need and keep things moving.
No arguments there. I will go ahead and get some quick answers to this question out of the way. Because I do not roll in person, I do not play in person any longer. Everything that I do is from this spot in front of these screens, this microphone with these headsets on when I play. And that presents opportunities and challenges. In some cases, I really prefer running online for the sake of player focus and telling my story and inexpensive visual aids. And in some senses, I like playing in person because sharing snacks and laughing and being in the same spot with my best friends. But when I am playing online, obviously D&D Beyond is, you can like it, you can not like it. It is the best way to create a character correctly every time and be able to reference it whenever you need to, and have the Dungeon Master be able to go in and check your work and edit your sheet if they need to add a homebrew magic item to your sheet or whatnot. Creating homebrew stuff on D&D Beyond is not incredibly intuitive, but that is neither here nor there. There is a link that I'm going to drop in the Discord when I finish talking to a 5e quick reference guide. It is basically a image of all of the conditions and all of the environmental effects, reactions, bonus actions, and moves that a particular character can take. It is quicker to reference something you already have pulled up than to Google a particular thing, and this has basically all of it. This is what I would want the inside of a Dungeon Master screen to look like if I were running a game in person once again. So I'll post that in the chat. The URL is too complicated for me to tell it to you and send you to it without it. When I'm using a virtual tabletop like Roll20, like Foundry, or any of those competing things for your dollar, I need to make specific tokens, and I like to have them look a certain way to be able to go on that sheet. Rolladvantage.com has a token maker that I use to make them look the same. I just have characters, players send me images that represent their characters, and I will make them look just like all of the monsters and make that uniform in a way that is pleasing to me. And finally, tetra-cube.com. If I ever have to make, I got two other guys nodding at me right now, If I need to make a stat block and make it look like Wizards of the Coast made it, almost, it is a great way to generate a stat block, especially if you're planning to publish anything that you have made or show it to other people and have it look the way they are expecting it to look. It's so easy. It's just drop-down menus, fill in the blank kind of stuff for creating your own monsters. I will put links to all of that somewhere in our Discord while these guys entertain you.
Well, thank you for Roll Advantage, because I didn't know about that one.
Oh, yeah. Great one.
So thank you for that one. The things that I love to use, so 3 of my games are online, 1 is in person. So for in person, I use I don't have to use table or VTTs or anything like that. Though, if I had a TV on my gaming table, I 100% would, because that's amazing. One day. But so when I'm playing online, I made the dive and got Foundry for the VTT because it's a one-time purchase only for. I'm not sponsored. One-time purchase only for the DM. And then your players get to play for free, and it has such cool weather effects and lighting effects that you can do, so that as the minis move around the board, they can now see around a wall that they couldn't see before because they didn't have long enough vision. And I just find that so cool to be able to use the VTT for exploration as well as for combat. I also love tabletop audio for just background music and sounds and ambiance, and that's really important for me, especially if I'm a player and I can just sit there and listen to things for a little while. But as for note taking, I love OneNote, just Microsoft OneNote, being able to have so many tabs for specific things. I used to do it all just in a friggin' Word document, and it was just outline form, and it was hard to find things when you wanted to. OneNote has made that a lot easier for me. So those are some of my go-tos, and I love TetraCube for stat block creation. I'm sure there are more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
Yeah, I want to try and incorporate like a virtual tabletop in eventually at some point, but I just got to learn how to actually use it. I think it just adds a whole nother level, especially from the streaming aspect. It's like, okay, this is what they're seeing. And like, Rob, you did that, the battle of the characters for that episode you ran, where it was kind of like a free-for-all type of thing. It's like they all started in certain spots and they didn't know where each other was. I really like it's like you don't know if they're in the next chamber, or you don't know if they're down the hallway or behind a pillar.
Really fun.
Right now, I really like that, and I would like to eventually get to that point. I'm just trying to familiarize myself a little bit more.
Let me just say,
and
Dan, you were robbed in that episode, by the way.
Who, me?
That was your adventure to lose, my man. I'm so sorry.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and yeah, you take a bad bet on which Minotaur you need to fight, and
and Rob,
cast Wall of Force on you, and
if you start streaming your VTT, you're going to have to run a second instance of it as a player, so that the people watching it don't get the DM's view.
See, that's
there are things that you might, like invisible enemies that might not want seen, or enemies who haven't come in yet. So you'll have to have a player instance on your computer as well as the DM instance.
See, that's awfully smart that I don't do. I
don't do that either.
Shut the hell up. It's like, you know my secrets.
Get some good views.
I zoom in really close so they can only see.
Okay.
No, yeah,
but that's smart. That's smart.
Way smarter. But yeah, in the last fight that I had on the Theros campaign, there was a series of enemies that got increasingly difficult, and they came at the end of each round, and they were all visible on the stream, and everybody could see the monsters that were coming out. But it was always a game of like, chat, don't tell the players.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of like third-party apps, TetraCube's a good one. I've had this one for a really long time, which I think is also one that is, I don't think it exists anymore, because I think it's been taken off of like all of the app stores. But they can't get rid of my download, and they also can't stop the people from uploading to the current like platforms of it. So it's basic. I think it's just like a 5e character sheet, and it's just something quick and easy. You can just input a lot of stuff and very quickly get characters. I usually have them for NPCs, or strong NPCs, I'd say, because sometimes I look at like the thug stat block and I'm like, this guy needs to be way more intimidating than what the thug is offering.
Somewhere more than a thug and less than a bandit captain. Just there needs to be a middle ground.
And
I'm a big fan on that note of like when you're wanting to upgrade things. If you've seen the Matthew Colville's action-oriented
Yeah.
monsters idea. I think it's brilliant, especially if you're
What's
doing. So the whole concept of it is, you know how high level the legendary actions that
Yeah.
some bad guys get, using them more often for something called like villain actions. So a plotted out, not on their initiative thing on turn one, they will do this. Like a
that?
popular one he suggests is get over here, calling in reinforcements.
Mhm.
On
Gotcha.
turn two, do another. Again, not on their initiative, because then it makes it feel more interesting, especially if it's one or two bad guys and 5 players. Especially in 5e, you gotta have them act also not on their initiative.
It's
but
based
it-
a lot on 4E principles, isn't it?
Taking the good that 4e did for monster stat blocks, which is I think what 4e did best,
Mhm.
and yeah, also having those be based off what type of enemy they are. But it creates, instead of an ogre and this other creature feeling almost identical aside from their skinning, because they run up to you and they punch,
Yeah.
and they punch and they punch. No matter how good you are as a DM at flavoring it differently, it is the same. And having those unique, holy crud, that's not even an actual feature, or yes, you're homebrewing, that's not an actual thing that they can do, but it was so flavorful and so amazing that it just makes it more memorable. Yes, makes them more challenging. Sorry.
No, you're good. In fact, if I can hijack and ask a question, I will. But first, I want to, on the note of third-party things, we had some submissions from the chat, so I don't want to leave those out. Icy suggests Roll for Fantasy as a website that could be helpful.
Roll for Fantasy.
We also have Owlbear Rodeo as a fun and fast virtual tabletop. I've heard of that one. I've not personally experienced
Roll
it,
for Fantasy, yeah.
but that is one that I have heard of before. Donjon, as in the old spelling of dungeon, donjon.bin.sh is a fantastic site for everything, says Eric the Existential Nerd. I've used that one before. But kind of on the note that you were addressing there, I'm trying to pick up in my brain kind of where we left off.
Just talk about like the villain actions creating more unique creatures rather than reskinned.
Because you were mentioning from Matt Colville, and this is something that I'm always fascinated by, because your heroes in anything that you have heroes in are rarely completely original, right? They learn from someone else to be as good as they are, and they learn from someone else to be as good as they are, and we keep following it back. Matt Colville actually said, a writer is only as original as the obscurity of their sources. And I find that is very true. So, the 4 of us that are on screen, I'm very curious to know, when we were learning to be better dungeon masters, where did we go? Who did we look to? And where would people who aren't looking to us go to find advice and input and inspiration? Let's kick it to Dan and maybe just go around the wheel here.
I gotta say Dimension 20. I think that's where most of my learning to be a better DM, and I think part of that just comes with coming up with more interesting combat encounters, because it's like combat encounters can get very droll very quickly if you're not careful, and they can become just a numbers game. And so just like I think the one philosophy, which seems so simple when you think about it, but it's when you incorporate it, it makes it all the more better, is having multiple objectives in a combat encounter. So as opposed to kill the main bad guy, right? You can have kill the main bad guy, but also let's make sure our ship doesn't sink.
That's an important one. Yeah.
As they are actively trying to break it, or subdue this character, but also we have to make sure that the room is not flooded before we get a chance to do anything, right? So having those multiple things, because what that does is that it's it creates multiple avenues for multiple players to then investigate, right? They can be like, okay, you handle this, and I go handle this, and you go and do this, and I'll go handle this, and it makes it a lot more engaging as opposed to just getting up on one individual. But yeah, I'd say Dimension 20 is where most of my inspirations to become better at DMing. All the DMs that have cycled through there, Abria, Brennan, have just been incredible. So
Solid, yeah. I know Maddie is a big fan of Brennan, and I reckon that's something y'all share, is a love for Dimension 20.
Yeah. It's good
Rob,
stuff.
what you got?
So a lot of mine, especially being new, I'm gonna ride that horse till I can't anymore. It comes off of, I benefit more off of like influence from my peers, whether that be go on Reddit and I ask questions like, "Hey, how did you do this?" or like, "This is what I'm trying to do. Is there a way to do this?" I actually watched some playthroughs of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and I joined the Discord server of the guy that was running that, and I asked him questions. And like, as cheesy as this sounds, like I asked Rob off stream, I asked you questions, like not as opposed to like the story, but like how can I make this interesting or kind of tweak this a little bit? And Ethan, as far as like I love your TikToks and your Instagram reels that you put out on your rants. Like there's just so much knowledge, and like I learn and get more off of the people around me that I know have done this. Like they have an opinion. It's like, okay, I trust you guys. Like there's something to learn there.
Awesome. Peer-to-peer.
Mhm.
I dig it.
100%. So I think they fall into several categories for me. Absolutely, I think that it would be disingenuous not to give incredible credit to Brennan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer and
Sure.
Abria, but especially the first two whom I watch a lot of. It's hard to watch hundreds of hours of someone DMing and not be influenced by it. Now, being influenced by it doesn't mean doing what they do. Sometimes you're influenced by watching and saying, I don't want to do that. And that is just as valuable a lesson. There was this quote that said, if you want to be a writer, don't just read good books, read terrible books, so that you know what you don't want to do. Not to say that those people are terrible. They're obviously the best of what they do. But even sometimes you learn and say, I don't know if I would have done that. And you bring that into your game. Matthew Colville, from like the behind the screen side of things, his YouTube channel on running the game is just phenomenal. And he has decades of experience, not just as a DM, but as a game designer.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important. And I think I've said this before, but my other biggest influence, again, like Matt said, your references. And I think that one of a DM's best resources are great stories that your players haven't read or watched or played. Because once they get the reference, getting a reference gives us that dopamine hit because we're pattern recognizing creatures. But when they don't know, I'm totally ripping this from this great book series, they get to have the organic experience. And as much as we may have confidence in our storytelling, there are storytellers out there who are way better than us. So I use the Ren Fair mantra of beg, borrow, and steal as much as you can. And that is one of the reasons I'm such a voracious reader, and I'm tabbing my books saying, that's a great idea for this campaign, stealing that.
Excellent. Before I answer, I will say thank you to Yekum and to Herb44 Yikwi. There's probably a better way to say that, but however you say it, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for the follow and joining our weird little family. This is just a Dungeon Master panel where Dungeon Masters with varying levels of experience and varying years of experience are coming together and chatting about what we love about the game and learning from the School of Hard Knocks. And I will say that is one of the more valuable resources that you can learn from is your own mistakes. Because goodness, I did not get it right the first time necessarily, and I am still, especially since opening myself up to Twitch and to the opinions of the internet, I realize that in a microcosm, there are some things that I do great, and in a macrocosm, I am a small fish in a big pond in some ways, and there are definitely things that I need to improve on. And just to add to Ethan's list here, Matt Colville was obviously an inspiration. I will say, I love his ideas and his perspective far more than I enjoy watching him actually run the game. But not every dungeon master has to be a performer or an entertainer, and his players are having a great time, and that is the most important thing. He doesn't have to be for the entertainment of me. Chris Perkins. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, and I think that that's an interesting sign of also the generation that he started playing from. You know, Matt Mercer, Brennan, they're also voice actors. They are actors. Matt Colville is a game designer and a writer.
Yeah.
He is not an actor. And that's why, like you said, I love his behind the screen stuff. I don't love watching his games. I'm sure I would love playing in one of his games.
Absolutely.
Because there is a big difference between what is fun for a viewer and what is fun for the player.
Right.
Sorry, I apologize.
No, and I almost
Yeah.
would rather pick up on that than say what I was going to say. But to give credit where credit's due, I can't talk about inspirations and heroes without mentioning Seth Skorkowski, who I mentioned earlier in the stream. I love watching him play. He doesn't release what he runs for the internet to enjoy because he doesn't want to be subject to that stigma that he has to be entertaining. And also because it's private and it's fun and it's an intimate thing for him running a game that he shares with his players, and I very much respect that. But Chris Perkins, man, he's got the tenure. He was one of the driving forces behind the Curse of Strahd. He is a incredibly considerate dungeon master who takes his players into account and emphasizes the things that are interesting to them in the moment through the Acquisitions Incorporated games, through Dice Camera Action, which broke my freaking heart when that game had to end because of why it had to end, but love that very much. He's the GOAT in my mind. But if we can, if it's okay with everyone here, let's transition to that, because it is genuinely called the Matt Mercer effect out there on the internet, where people are scared to be dungeon masters because they are comparing themselves to the pinnacle because of what they have seen on the internet. This was not a problem before the internet. If you were a dungeon master for your group of friends, you were the best dungeon master that any of them had ever seen because you were the only dungeon master that any of them had ever seen. And now you have standards to compare yourself to. You have luminaries. It's like being in a high school play when the silver screen exists. I'm interested in y'all's perspectives on that, y'all's thoughts on that, or maybe ways to combat it as you prepare yourself to run for people who know these names and who have seen these streams. We started with Dan last time, maybe Rob?
All right. Yeah, so I would say I definitely felt like before I started running, I was definitely hit with the Matt Mercer effect. If we say his
Mass
name
Effect
enough,
Mercer, yeah.
the Mass Effect Mercer. If we say his name enough, maybe he'll just like pop up here. I don't know.
Oh, it's like the Candyman.
Ethan, what's behind you there? So like that, seeing Matt Mercer run Critical Role, because like I came into like D&D actually like 60 episodes into campaign 2, and like it was like, oh, this is cool. And actually my first interaction with it was at a convention. I saw a bunch of cosplayers and I saw like as characters from the Mighty Nine, and I was like, oh, these are so cool. Like I've heard about Critical Role, but I haven't dove into it yet. And that was a mistake because I jumped into it and I was like, this is awesome. I love these stories. And then I was like, oh, you know, maybe one day, like, I was like, I can't do that. Like, there's no way I can tell a story that good. I can't do fun voices. I can't do this. And like, it was a lot of that, like, I guess it would be imposter syndrome, because what did I do? I threw myself into it, and I was like, I think Rob thought I was crazy because I was like, you know what? I want to run a game.
Don't
live
fight it.
on
I
Twitch.
still do.
I was like, I want to do this. Like, and I was like, it's an opportunity. You were you know, looking for people to run games and stuff and create content, and you're like, you were very generous. Like, you don't have to do this. And I was like, no, like, I want to do this. It's something that I can do, and it's a skill that I can learn. And is it perfect? No. But do my players have fun? I would like to say so, you know? So that's where I'm learning from. I definitely fell in that mindset, and I'm coming out of it.
Let's go around the horn, Ethan.
First off, minor thing. I hate the fact that it has the moniker, the Matt Mercer effect. That is incredibly
I'm
unfair.
sure he hates
it's not,
that it has.
I have no doubt that he has had his emotional wrestling matches with that. But, you know, if we're going to call it that, we also have to give huge credit to the huge number of people who started playing the game. Because if we're going to call it the Matt Mercer effect when there's this, you know, negative thing, then let's call it the Matt Mercer effect on that.
Absolutely.
Because I think of all the people I'm currently playing games with, easily 50% started playing because of Crit Role.
Mm-hmm.
Not any others. Maybe a few of them Adventure Zone.
Which, ooh,
but
yeah, that's a can
also,
of worms too.
it's a totally different style and funny, but so fair trait and fair credit due there. But one of my opinions on it is that I think that the effect of the Matt Mercer effect and what that is supposed to mean, of the pressure that is put on the DM to live up to the performance of Matt, has a couple faulty foundations. And that is one, like we touched on, that what is fun for viewers will inherently be fun as players. That isn't true. Like, for everyone. For some players, it's 100% true that they want exactly that. But, you know, watch a shopping episode. They are not equal amounts of fun for player and viewer. You get to decide where they are, but they're not equal. We can say that for sure. But the other misunderstanding or not seeing the full picture is that Matt Mercer doesn't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
He's 1/8 of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you watch Matt do the one-on-one with Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert is a trained comedian,
yeah,
it still doesn't hit as well. Obviously, it's a little 1 hour one shot, but that just goes to show how much of what Crit Role is because of the players. So if you as a player are going to hold your DM to the Matt Mercer standard, you better be bringing some Travis Willingham or some Laura
Sam
Bailey.
Riegel, please.
And I don't mean play exactly how they play, because again, there's a whole argument there, but do some of the positive things they do, like pay attention, be invested, and bring your other players into the game in moments. Don't try to imitate them, just like we shouldn't have to imitate Matt. But if you expect X quality from DM of Crit Role, you should be willing to try to bring X quality of players of Crit Role.
I try and be as crass as Sam Riegel in my everyday life.
Bless you.
It's not going so well, but yeah, man, it sets a high standard. Dan, how do you feel? What's your take?
Honestly, you know, first couple of years of DMing never really had that effect. Mainly because I think out of, unlike most people that have gotten into D&D, I didn't even get into D&D because of Critical Role. I got into D&D because of Harmon Quest. Which was quite,
oh my
quite
God.
the odd way to jump into it. So when I had first started playing and DMing, I was making all of the rolls. None of the players had dice. It was me making all of those rolls and memorizing their character sheets and memorizing their abilities, you know, getting it all done, which I found out is not how it's usually played. And,
that's the one way of playing though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when I had first started, I didn't really have that sort of standard to look up to, because my standard of Harmon Quest was not necessarily like competing against performers. I was competing against animation stills that were happening in the middle of the thing. So in my head, I was like, oh, I gotta keep the story active, keep it moving, keep it rolling, and keep things moving without having any understanding of, oh, it's edited, oh, it's, you know, they have pauses, they have breaks, you know, all of that stuff. And so for me, I think ultimately, right, there's always that fear of like, you know, whether or not you're being put to that standard or put to that sort of leveling of it. But ignorance is bliss sometimes. And I think, you know, just having an understanding of like, well, you know, they exist and they're doing their thing and I'm going to be doing my thing. And, you know, if anybody comes in a confrontation of like, well, that's not, you know, well, that's how Matt did it, you know, my usual response to be, I've never had that response, let's be clear, but I've heard that in communities, people have said to their DMs, well, you know, Matt Mercer did it this way, then my response would be like, well, then go play with them. You know, that's just the, you know, I'm doing my thing, I'm learning, I'm doing the stuff, and you know, if you're not having a good time, we can talk about that. We can, you know, make sure that that's happening. But you know, some things I may not know how to do just because of just sheer number of like skill and talent that somebody else has, right?
Yeah, and years of experience, because out of all of us put together, with Ethan excluded, we don't have the pedigree that Matt Mercer had. Matt Mercer was not putting himself out there on the internet when he was at my level of play, or with Dan's level of play, or frick no, Rob's level of play. You know what I mean? I want to share something from the chat, by the way. We're getting some wonderful love from our fans and followers in the chat, saying that we also have some great players and how that really helps. And good Dungeon Masters too. We'll throw that out there for y'all who are on screen. Leo Yeager, who by the way just gifted a sub to 1,000 Faces Cosplay. Appreciate you supporting the channel, my man. Actually, your name is so long it broke my ye old bulletin in the top right there. But that's one subscription closer to me giving away some metal dice I have handy over here, just off camera, that I am not showing yet until we get a little bit closer. But the more I know, right? 38 away, as whenever we get that filled up, and normally our recurring subscribers come in later in the month. I send somebody some free dice from Misty Mountain Gaming, so something to look forward to there. But Leo Yeager came through the chat and said, and I got permission to share this, I remember being personally terrified to play D&D because I had watched a fair amount of Critical Role and watched the way they played the game, to what you were saying, Ethan, the players aspect as well. I really worried about being unable to be that creative as a player and letting others at the table down. I know it's really silly, but that was my only exposure to the game. So if that's all you know, then that's how you think D&D is played, and you don't know that you're seeing the NFL of D&D. You know, what we're really doing, and what we try kind of to share here on Misty Mountain Streaming, is kind of the backyard football, like tag football version of D&D. Like, warts and all, just this is as close as us all being around the same table and playing together as we can. We get up and we refill drinks, or we use the bathroom, or somebody has to go pick up a friend at the airport and can't make the game. And this is not a professional production. This is not scripted or thought out weeks or months in advance with hundreds of man hours of production and effort going into something. This is just D&D, you know? And it's fine to be at that level of play. We don't have to compare ourselves to insert name of sports guy here because I'm a nerd and don't keep up with sports.
Well, and there's a name for the effect. I forget what it is. Like, you watch professionals do something that they're a professional at, and it looks so easy. So you get this false belief that you have the knowledge and it is easy. Like watching 12 seasons of Great British Baking Show, you're like, oh, that's not going to rise.
Oh, yeah.
Should have needed that more. But in reality,
you in that spot,
you suck at it because you've never tried it, and their professionals are very good at it. And I think that the key is to just like when you're watching an athlete and
Mhm.
you know, go out and play on the court an hour after school or after work, is to use them as an inspiration, not an immediate goalpost. Don't compare your
Mhm.
chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10.
Yeah.
They've been doing it a lot longer.
That's good.
Goalpost. That's another a sports thing that I understand. Because I
Goalpost.
I
home
threw
run,
the strike
stick
through the
ball.
sports pole. Yeah.
Thank you, by the way, to the nice compliment from our man Peyton saying the point is to have fun and tell great stories, and that's what we do here. Thank you to Dabs, who gifted a subscription as well, 37 away from our goal. To Maverick, who is a new follower on the channel. People just showing up and getting subscriptions.
Maverick is
today.
one of
That
my
is awesome.
players, so I can't talk about any of my current campaigns.
I don't think we've ever hit a hype train on a roundtable night, but we're awfully close all of a sudden. Thank you guys so much for showing your support and love for a channel on a night that's not even about D&D. I mean, kind of it is, but you know what I
Wait a
mean.
minute.
You know what I mean. This is not the peak
I'm
Matt
very
Mercer
embarrassed.
entertainment that you came here for.
Are you not entertained?
I have a question to throw to people
yeah.
if no one else has one.
I had one, but
Go for it.
Okay. So we're gonna take it off the serious aspects here a little bit.
Wait, we were serious?
I thought we were, but
I've been lying this whole time.
tell me about your favorite NPC that you've created. If they have a voice, what they like to do, what if you had an inspiration to creating them. I'd like to hear it. And actually, I'll give you guys some time. I'll give you guys some time to think.
Yeah.
I'll start with mine. I again back to the homebrew conversation. I borrowed a character from the Witchlight game, and I gave him a whole personality. His name was Rocky, and he was an aspiring hooch maker. That by the end of the campaign, he had his own traveling wagon because Cheshire had set him free from the witch's hold and sent him on his way. And he was a crazy hooch dealer. He dealt all kinds of weird stuff and talked like this. And but he was probably my favorite that I have made. Now, Mistress Tickles, that's a whole different beast that we won't get into right now because it wasn't a soul creation. It was a mixture of people.
I'll go next and buy the other two a little bit more time, perhaps, because if you've been doing this for any length of time, you have a lot of guys, and you just have to start trying to tell them apart and remember things about them. The one campaign that I actually finished, start to completion, final boss dead, epilogue the characters, was called The Amber Sands of Maladoon, and it was a Arabian Nights themed, Aladdin-esque adventure, because that's what I polled my players beforehand and said, I've got ideas for these things, what do you want? And they did this. And when they finally made it across the desert and they made it into town, there were these princes, basically these sheiks, who shared rule over the city, and they had all these different people working for them, and they tried to curry favor with different ones. They wound up murdering some and replacing others. But I let them actually name this character. It was a very short human man, to the point where you could mistake him for a halfling. And we named him Millhouse, and they said he was described as being so small that you just wanted to punt him, just to pick him up. So his name was Millhouse Puntin. And he was a second only to one of the princes of Maladoon. And he, any time that he had to talk, he pretty much talked like this. And he was very officious and used long, pontificating kinds of words that you would know that he was intelligent, as you assumed that he might be, if you were to posit such a thing. But he really just wanted to be liked. He really wanted to be accepted, especially as these other people kind of grew in power. And then they at one point,
alluded that they might actually be friends, and he was just so overcome. He was touched, and it's very hard to cry in a voice like this and to get really emotional. So Millhouse
I love
Puntin,
that so much.
Millhouse Puntin was one of the more memorable NPCs that just came out of nowhere that the players kept going back to.
I love every bit of that.
Yep.
And I'm so envious of people that can actually like come up with voices and like stretch out, the words a little bit, make them sound different, even though it's like, okay, you could be saying it the same exact way, but like speeding up your cadence or slowing down, like Ethan's talked about on his TikToks. It's just like, I was like, that's a great way to do it. Maybe I can, maybe I can do that, but most of them end up just coming out the same. So.
Oh yeah, everything's coming up Millhouse.
That is a line in World of Warcraft. So
that's a line in The Simpsons. Who else?
Dan?
Come back to me.
Okay.
There's so many.
Your PCs are on the level of my NPCs, by the by.
So this NPC actually started off as a PC in a little mini game that one of my players ran for me, Maverick, in the chat, to let me not DM for a little bit. So, of course, my first character that I make to be a player 6 years is a 65-year-old human man named Murray. And so I introduced him in the Rise of Tiamat game because the players in the other game were players there. Just as he was literally going to walk by, pickpocket the barbarian, just for them to see him. That was the end. When he pickpocketed the barbarian chased him down, pushed him up against the wall, said, "I'm impressed that you managed to steal from me. Come work for us."
Nice.
And so, Murray, this old man, ended up becoming the most recurring NPC in the entire campaign.
And
It's
he
like
ended
a
up
drunk
forming
Gandalf. It's fucking great.
He ended up forming a really close connection with the elf PC, and when they marched off, they were about to march off to go fight Tiamat. He approached her and asked to take her place. She said, "No, I can't do that. But you can come with us and fight." And his response was,
"No, that's sacrificing yourself for someone you don't know. That's what heroes do. I'm not a hero. You are a hero. But I would sacrifice myself for you."
and
Chills.
broke that character, broke that PC for a little while. But Murray is now my Stanley, that he will appear in every universe I run in some form.
That is amazing.
That's so cool.
Kick ass. Awesome.
Oh,
Old man named Murray. Stole that straight from Scrubs.
There you
Because
go.
all old men are named Murray, apparently.
There's that's a great one. I think there's so many that I myself remember fondly, and then there are also some that I think the players liked more than I anticipated them liking, right? And so that's always like the toss up of like which NPCs you make and then which NPCs end up just becoming the favorite. I think one that I hadn't this was actually much as you're saying, Ethan, of the player character that then became an NPC. I had run in this one shot. I had this character who her name was Elixir Marlowe, and she was a gnome alchemist who, over the years of testing potions on herself and getting all of that done, has completely like wired her brain differently, and she just went into this sort of very much, oh boy, what do we have here today? Oh boy. Oh, and she also would never refer to characters by their names. She only referred to characters by recognizable shapes and patterns that she could associate. And so she had this one, like they were looking for this one character, and she's like, "Oh, big circle, tiny triangle. That's who we're looking for?" And so she was very like, and constantly was always like just a mode of just like, what does this do, and just testing, literally going through every single trap just because she was just curious as to like what it did. And so I'd say that's probably my own favorite that I haven't had a chance to play as much, but yeah, she's just a bundle of chaos, and can't wait to make some new friends.
Oh God, there's something slightly horror movie
I
about
was
that
just getting ready to
voice.
say that. Like, that sounds like a creepy
Some
doll
new
t-shirt.
friends forever and ever.
100%.
You wanna play in the basement?
Yeah.
Oh dear, I can't really do that.
Absolutely not.
Even come close to that voice right now.
And I just
Um,
wanted to. Someone in the chat just was talking about accent gatekeeping, basically,
yeah, that was
or
good old Eric.
putting too much pressure on having a voice. And I always try to tell my players, I would love if you're going to do first person performance, which is its own separate chat there. I would like your voice to be distinct in some way so that I know. But it doesn't even have to be your voice. It can be your mode of speech, like Rob was referencing. With this being my usual cadence, if I did this, not suggesting it because it'll slow things down, but that does make it very, at least just that little thing can help me as the DM know whether you're in or out of character.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that can be, if it's the exact same voice, that can cause problems sometimes. But you don't have to use a voice.
Yeah.
You don't.
And there's so many resources out there on the internet. Apparently, you have made some, Ethan, referencing ways to do that without having like a very broad vocal range, which I personally do not have. I try and work the best with what I've got, but I'm nowhere near. I couldn't go pro, you know. But if you, one of the very simplest ways that I can think of it is if I were just using my normal voice, and I began to imitate Morgan Freeman's style of speaking, where certain syllables just kind of get dragged out more than they ought to. Or start talking a little bit quicker, a little bit more Jim Carrey, just talking about like when he's on Red Bull. Have you ever tried Red Bull? I haven't tried Red Bull, but now I tried Red Bull and now I love Red Bull. Or something a little more Shatner-esque, where even your normal voice sounds rather different. Just breaking up little bits of cadence or imitating actors that you have seen. Nobody has to know, oh, he's trying to do Rodney Dangerfield right now. They just know that's clearly the character talking, right? And nobody knows if you mess up because the character you're portraying doesn't actually exist.
The ones that I love to recommend to people are things you can do that you get the voice just by literally changing how your mouth sits. Like bite half of your lips closed and talk. And this is without me trying to have any type of affect. It's already different.
Mm-hmm.
And or don't take your teeth apart, and you get the McMurray from Letterkenny. If you just talk like this the entire time, then you lose some of your sounds. You don't get the S, and then you just try to get a little bit of that country voice in there. God damn it!
Never picked up on that's how he talked.
Well, in the first season, especially when you watch him, he just does not take his teeth apart.
It's too much effort to open your mouth, you know. Just let the lips work.
But little things like that can make such a difference, and they don't even qualify as accents, you know.
Yeah. That was a completely different thing. I have a question. I think, Rob, are you currently playing in a game? I think the answer is no. All right.
No.
Ethan, you're running almost 4 games. Are you playing in a game? Dan, are you playing in a game right now, just like regularly?
I'm playing one game of Curse of Strahd right now.
Okay. So
This is why I classify DMs as players too, so that I can say I am a player.
Exactly, right? We show up to play just like everybody else. We put our pants on one leg at a time. So here's the question here, and I am personally of the opinion that when an opportunity to play comes up, you should work with your dungeon master to come up with a character that is appropriate for the story that you are about to try and tell. So do not like bringing prefabricated characters that I've been thinking about for 2 years into just any old story offends my sensibilities a little bit. Not that there's anything wrong with it, I just don't want that to be my default. I don't have a roster of characters that I like, and I'm looking for the campaign for them, while I know a lot of people do. But just even broader than that question, what's the next class you're excited to play, and why is that? We did Dan, then Rob. Let's do Ethan first.
Wizard. I love wizards so much, man, and I have since 3.5. They are my favorite class.
So
They
you like
always have
dying
been.
then, huh? Hit points aren't a thing for you, huh?
Levels, look, there used to be this old thing that went around in forums back in that day. That was the way it works is the wizard hides behind the fighter for the first 5 levels, so he doesn't die. Then the fighter sits, especially in previous editions, then the fighter sits back on a lounge chair drinking tequila sunrises and watching the fireworks while collecting gold so he can send his children to wizard school.
Exactly.
If you survive the young levels,
Linear
wizards are amazing.
linear fighters and quadratic wizards. I know the,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm older than my actual experience with the game in many ways. But wizards, so you've done wizards before, but still excited to do them again?
I haven't gotten to actually play as one as a PC in 5e. Because forever DM. So I want to be able to see how they progress so that I can, in a more hands-on way, kind of compare the experience between previous edition wizards and them.
That's an interesting one too. You're gonna need a friendly dungeon master for wizards, particularly because to get full effect, you need to kill a wizard and take a spell book or loot one now and again to be able to really flex being able to learn more spells than other classes.
You can also, if depending, you can pay someone.
Sure.
That's a common one if you're in a big town. Like, I'm going to go find the Arcane Academy and buy some spells, if that's cool. But yeah, that's why you got to get that enduring spell book, because the most evil thing a DM can do to their wizard is, you swam?
Did you pay extra for the non-running ink? Did you have it in a plastic bag? You didn't have it in a plastic bag. What do you mean plastic hasn't been invented? Okay, good answer. Dan, what are you looking forward to? What's next?
I'd actually say wizard as well.
Wow.
Because I don't think as a player I've had the chance to play as a wizard. I think I've played barbarians, I've played rogues, I've played paladins, but I think I'd want like a full. I want to do a full caster, and I think wizard is the way to go with that regard. And really, just sort of like thinking about all of the different ways that magic can be used in combination with like other effects, right? And getting real creative. I know in one of my games I have a player who is like the most creative when it comes to like using like their magic. Like I think they had done something recently which I didn't even realize, which was the wording on Wall of Force. Because most people will use Wall of Force as a 10 by 10 foot wall, but the wording of it is that it's up to 10 feet, which means that you could make it smaller if you wanted to. And they were fighting this evil wizard in the fight, and they had gotten that wizard's arcane focus out of his hands and Wall of Force around that focus. And so it was a creative use of it that I really want to dive into, like really read through those spells and like how can I flex this to its like utmost capability.
And you have to be so strategic with wizard because they're prepared casters.
Yes.
You have to pick at the start of the day. And one of the interesting things in Pathfinder 2 is you have to pick what specific level, and you have to relearn the spell at different levels. If you have Magic Missile at 2nd level, you can only cast it at 2nd level until you find the 3rd level version.
I am missing a Pathfinder 2e game where I am playing a wizard to be on this stream tonight. No, it's all right. It's all right. They it wound up being canceled anyhow. But that's normally how I spend my Wednesday nights now, is trying out Pathfinder 2e, and I was dumb enough to pick wizard. And
it's crazy.
It is more work, turns out. Imagine that Pathfinder being more work than 5e.
I think wizard is the highest workload class because of the prepared aspect
Yeah.
where you can't just be like, I'll figure out what I need to do situationally. You need to
Think about it later. That's
think
a
about
future
what are we
Rob
likely to do
problem.
today. Are we going to be doing a lot of social stuff? Charm.
What up, Rob? What you wanting to play, man?
So I am simple-minded when it comes to my games. My everything. I'm up in your face a warrior, usually a two-handed weapon, so I'm gonna go with a barbarian.
Hell
It's the
yeah.
only class I ever have played, and it scares me to do anything else. I absolutely love watching, like in the Critical Role show. Like I love Grog. He
Hard not
cracks
to,
me
man.
up. Just love it. And when he,
Such a
This
big love bug.
this guy knows.
I'm not gonna, I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, no, this last season, about halfway through, things happened, and I was just like, I love this so much.
I'm as puny as Vex.
What
about you,
they have
Rob?
fun with that show. I've genuinely done them all. I do not really accept Artificers and Bloodhunters as real conversations in the group here, just because they came after my player's handbook. So, I've run for Artificers, I welcome them in my games. I've run for Bloodhunters, I welcome them in my games. I'm gonna still say that I've 100% of the list with just the others. Even
Have
if
you
it's
done
only been a
all of the
one-shot.
subclasses?
No, there's no way. I'm too much of a DM for that. But I had to say that I've tried everything out at least once. The next thing on my docket is my brother, who I co-host the Bardic Twinspiration podcast with. Thank you for the smile at the joke, Ethan. He likes to shit on monks, and it's a little bit of a joke here and there, because I have, like, the meme here is that I hate Twilight clerics and he hates monks, and I want it spawns from the fact that he genuinely thinks they are underpowered. So my goal is to play a monk next and trot them out and just teach my brother a lesson. Say, no, monks are good. Monks are perhaps too good in certain situations, and certainly they can hold their own in others. I don't think
Ranged,
they're the most
the
powerful
thing you gotta-
class in the game, but they're good.
You're gonna have to think about what you're gonna do for flying enemies. They're the bane of every monk.
Oh, I've got some ideas. And the other thing is, no player exists in a vacuum. No class exists in a vacuum.
Sure.
There is no class except the druid who has an answer to every situation somewhere in their kit. So you're expected to have party members to help you solve different things. And the reason that I'm picking on the druid right now is because last night we recorded an episode of the podcast talking about the new 1D&D playtest content for the druid. Which also involved a lot of looks at the 5e druid and how I really do think they need to be reined in. And boy howdy did they, perhaps too much.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of the new?
Not a fan of the new.
Yeah. I think it was a step in the right direction, but I think it was a few steps too far. Is to spoil the podcast episode that's going to drop in 2 weeks.
And for those of you who don't know what the changes to that wild shape is, the proposed change for the 1D&D is that there are 3 types of wild shape: land, water, and air. And no matter what land creature you take the form of, they all have the same stats.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes your health pool instead of getting a wild shape health pool, which is a huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, if I were on the podcast, if your brother wasn't disagreeing with that argument about them being overpowered, I might have stepped. I don't think they're overpowered, man.
Oh,
No.
let's chat again. As
Hear your opinion.
this is neither the time nor place, but I will. That is the kind of thing that I will. I'll work my way through a few of these and have that conversation with basically
I would love
anybody.
to.
Because you know what? This has come up so many times in my life. Other people I know have artistic abilities. Other people have like business knowledge or
Mm.
acumen or the ability to do all these. I got D&D, man. Like that's my thing. Let's talk about where I live, and I will talk with you all night.
Go.
I don't even care if we agree. I'm just happy to talk about it.
Oh, yeah. That's why we're here. It's because we just love talking about this geeky thing.
We probably have time for one more question.
All right.
And my coworker actually he suggested this. And he said, what is, as a DM, because we all have tendencies to every once in a while be evil. And I'm sorry if any of my current
What?
players are here, you know.
No.
I like to be a little evil from time to time. What is your favorite moment that your players all of a sudden were like, oh shit, what did you just do?
Oh,
And if I need to go first, I can.
I'll
Yeah,
go.
I need to think on it.
I'll jump on the bullet for this one. This goes all the way back to my very first game that I ever ran, which was a first edition Pathfinder game. And to be clear, I did not know the rules to first edition Pathfinder while I was running the game. I was hiding my lack of knowledge behind an interesting and quite convoluted story. One of the characters, because you can do anything in Pathfinder back then, because so many books had been published, was playing a she, which is a fae creature, tall, statuesque, and did the whole, like, fairy thing of kidnapping children and leaving a fae changeling in their place. And this was normal for the character because it was normal for a she to do these kinds of things. But that child that was kidnapped left the Fae Circle, left this little pocket dimension that they were in, found out what had been done to her unbeknownst to the players, and was co-opted by someone who eventually came to be a villain of the campaign. And learning what had been done to her, learning that there were other children out there like her who'd been taken from their lives, taken from their parents, and just ripped out of the world that they belonged in, trained herself up to hunt Fae creatures and became basically the Fae version of a Van Helsing. And found this player character later in their career, and years older, very different from how this character remembered them, because it's a little bit wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, right? Like Fae stuff doesn't happen the same way that real stuff does. They're having a boss fight that they have no idea, like, what is going on, and the enemy that they're fighting, they're intent on killing, that has caused them so many problems up until this point, gets her mask ripped off, and it's the player character's daughter. And they didn't know who she was, and it gives the player characters pause. She knows who they are. She knows what they've done, and she is intent on killing this player character, killing this person who views himself as her father. And that was the first time I got players to cry at my table, first of all, which was a wonderful milestone to hit in your first campaign. And they had to make decisions about what to do with her, because if they left her to her own devices, she was going to come back. She was going to try and stop them and kill that player character for everything that she thought that he had put her through. I don't know if evil is the right word, but it was certainly one of the more memorable moments of something that I could easily not have done, and everyone would have been happier for the experience. But it was a roleplay moment that was 8 years ago, and we still talk about that. Rob, for your reference, that was Misty Mountain Gaming employee Steven's player character that went through that.
Oh, okay.
And Ian was also in that game.
Okay.
So that's about as mean as I have been, I guess, as a dungeon master, is giving a player the question in character of whether or not to kill or how to handle someone that they viewed as a child of theirs that wanted to murder them.
I guess I should rephrase, like, it doesn't have to be like evil, but more of like the players being like, oh shit, or like, what the fuck? Like why would you do that?
Oh, that's how I
thing.
took it. So
Yeah, no,
how I
that
tried to
definitely
answer it.
fits that. But I just wanted to rephrase it for the other gentleman. Like, it doesn't have to be that, oh, I'm an evil DM,
I think the one moment that comes to mind, which was something where I had like broken the rules a little bit in order to make the villain more scary, which was that I had this villain. He was a Rashaka who had disguised himself as the king of this kingdom and essentially had been running this kingdom in disguise for almost like 30 years and was an insanely powerful spellcaster. But the rule that I had broken, which was he had a ring on each one of his fingers, as well as several adorning jewelries, and they were all magic items that all had like various properties and everything. So I broke the attunement rule for this one character because I wanted that feeling of like when the characters were in the midst of fighting him, it was like he's doing this and he's doing this, and it was like, yep. And it's like, how does he do that? He's like, he made a deal with the devil a long time ago, and it has worked out well for him. So I think that was a moment.
I was gonna say, I'm picturing Xerxes from 300.
Yeah, very much that like adorned with jewelry
Yeah.
type aesthetic, and each one of them was its own magic item that was causing just havoc on the battlefield, and all the players were like, "What the fuck?"
There are so many that come to mind. Like there was one where the party decided to split up, right in town, right when I had a 3 dragon attack scheduled
Oh,
to happen, and that resulted in 3
you
player
gotta
deaths.
keep that meeting. Just-
I mean, they're on their way. They were on their way. I can't change that. But the most recent one that comes to mind is in the Curse of Strahd game. The paladin had at one point in his life was dying and made a deal with a dark entity to spare his life in return for a favor at one point. So when traveling through Barovia, he started getting these dreams where he saw himself killing a priest of the Morning Lord with his goddess Saloon behind him and pushing him on and encouraging him. And when they got to the church in Vallaki, he recognized the priest. And
I'm glad you said Vallaki and not Kresk, because that would have been a fight.
That's true. But so he starts to wage his mental war with this demon, and realizing that it wasn't going to stop without blood, in his mind, he drew his sword and stabbed himself in the heart. So as he was praying at the church, his friends just saw him spit up blood and collapse and die. And there was nothing, they had no way of preventing it. And they got to have their grieving and dealing with that. And he's coming back as a hollow one. So that'll be fun. In Barovia, having him come back as a zombie will be super fun.
Ooh.
I gotta
Person
say,
undead.
awfully considerate of the chap to off himself in the church so close to a cemetery. Like, I know there's an NPC gravedigger, like, right there.
It's like, that's just courtesy.
Yeah.
It's just courtesy. I don't want him to have to carry me far. Come on.
Yeah, it's
They're already
paladin, he's heavy. And
They're already stressed. You know what they're going through in Vallaki? Come on.
So strip that armor down, sell it nearby, and pay for the funeral. You know, Ezek will show up. He's got nothing going.
You got to profit with the cost of paladin armor. Come on.
And this goes back to the virtue of running the modules, because when you say that, I'm like, I know that NPC. I know the Gravedigger NPC. I know that town. I know who the Morning Lord is and what they represent. That's
and
great.
if we never did the same story, it would be like we never watched the same movies in different households, Art and stories are part of how we connect.
To Mud's Eye's point, I hope nothing we have said has spoiled anything for the Curse of Strahd. It is, in my opinion, peak 5th edition modules. No.
I think
I
Cable
think you
Way's
did a
got
great
one of the
job.
towns is named
If,
Valaki.
if anyone has sinned, it has been me. But yeah, that is great.
So my moment that I'm proud of, I can't take full creative disclosure for it, but when I read it, I was like, this is fucking gold. I love this. So right now I'm running through Spelljammer Academy. And it's fun. I'm kind of regretting going into it because we experienced some ship combat for the first time last session, and it's like, oh, now you have to account for the ships too. What? It's a lot of stuff to keep track of. But in the first session, the players, they woke up just from they assumed they went to sleep, and I was like, all right, the next day, or you wake up to explosions all around you, and you've been thrown into just a massive fight. Like, you know that you trust all the people around you. The captain is giving you orders saying, don't let them take the ship. Like, fight to the death. Do what you got to do. Another ship comes crashing into it. They have their battle, all of that. One of our characters, they shoot off a spell into one of the other ships that's flying over above them, and I was like, you know what? Like, I know what's gonna happen, and this could add some spice to it, so why not? So I let her shoot off her spell. I was like, oh yeah, it hits the ship, and oh okay, the ship is, it hit like an ammo cartridge or something, and it exploded. Well, now it came down and it split right through the middle of your ship, and like as as it cut through your ship, like the insides, it's kind of like Titanic at this point, and like you're one person's down, one person's saving another person, and you're sliding down into the emptiness of space below you, and like I'm like, okay, well, that's essentially two of you dead because you wanted to let go to save one of the other players, blah, blah, blah. And as you're sliding, it's like, then runes start popping up on the wall. And it was all a simulation. And they were like, what?
The classic DM tool was all a dream.
It's
the
holodeck meets the Kobayashi Maru, baby.
That's exactly what it was. And I loved every bit of it because it was written to be basically an unbeatable thing, and it technically said do 2 rounds of combat, but I was like, we're gonna go until it hits a good point, and then we'll call it. But knowing that I could be as brutal as I wanted to, because they weren't actually going to be making death saving throws, and in the book and in the training manual, it was written they're knocked unconscious, and like they don't die, like they come out of it just fine. They get a level of exhaustion when they get out of it, blah 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 blah. But getting to see the look on their faces, and I'm like, it was all fake, was priceless.
And also, shout out to you, Rob. You did a very smart thing with, if you're going to have a unbeatable situation, you only kept it to 2 rounds, because there is nothing more infuriating than fully playing out an unwinnable fight for 10 rounds, just like nothing we could have done. So you kept it short. You kept it concise, you built the intensity, and then you got out. Way to be.
Yeah, and that's I love it. The other small one that I had, like I'll say the small one, was when we finished up the Witchlight game. I decided, because time is different. Like this was entirely me just homebrewing it. I was like, okay, you came out of here. You were in the Witchlight, like the Feywild, for 2 weeks. You came out, and it was 8 years later, the next time that the carnival was in town. Like I was like, this makes it more interesting, because now if we wanted to continue playing, you have to deal with, like, one of the players had a sibling. It's like, okay, well, now they have a fiance, and like they've taken over the business, and it's like, there's a whole nother story that you could go down there. And I eventually want to build a world, but we can go into that next time we have a conversation.
And leaving ways to continue a story, but not have it feel unfinished.
Exactly.
Books. Yeah. That is good games mastership. I will go ahead and say we are about to be wrapping up this stream. It is about that time. If anybody has someone that is listening right now that they would like us to raid, I have like an unusually large amount of people in our community that I could flip everyone over to right now, but I love meeting new people and new faces. So if anyone has a suggestion, please put them in the chat, and we will go give them a visit and make some new friends. Thank you to Stronghold D&D showing up. Hello. I'm sorry you're catching us towards the end of the stream here. We're about to pop off, but I am so delighted to see you popping up. And thank you to Playotic Games for resubscribing to the channel. That is your second month, and we appreciate you being here. Again, we're making better friends with Playotic. They are now part of our adventurer program as a group. And I'm going to be playing on their channel come this Sunday. I will try and post again their, well, I don't still have it copy pasted, but I will try and copy paste their link in the channel, or just click on their name and go to their channel. Why am I trying to do this for you? You're all adults. Go find Playotic Games' Twitch channel, give them a follow, and see us play some Call of Cthulhu this coming week. On Sunday. I will go ahead and tell you I am playing Richard Osborne. Just call him Rich, because that is the defining characteristic of this character. Is having a high credit rating in Call of Cthulhu. Again, thank you guys all so much for watching. Thank you guys who are on the screen with me for coming and hanging out with us. I appreciate your input. I value you guys. It's super nice to meet you, Ethan. Thank you
so much for having me. I love getting to talk shop.
Thousand Faces Cosplay, the words are right here. Find him and the lovely Mrs. Hanging out on social media. Amazing cosplays. We were talking about Grog earlier. Clearly you've seen his guns pop up above the nameplate now and again. He's done some cosplays, some photo shoots, amazing photography and cosplay work on their Instagram.
You haven't seen his Chetney though.
I did see some Chetney. It's like, who is Rob bringing onto our channel now? It's like,
Chetney is one of my absolutely favorite characters. I could watch him all day long on the screen.
Let's see. Press X for awesome was a suggestion, so we're gonna try visiting them. What are they streaming right now? Idea Machines. Let's see. Press or. Isn't it press X to pay respects, or press X to dance, or what's the meme that I'm missing?
It has so many functions, you know.
Real quick before we jump off of here, announcements for the channel, and then you guys please send people wherever you would like to send them. We are not streaming again until next Tuesday. Dan, Edge of Knowledge, back on.
Back on. They're at the Temple of Mystery. They are going through a lot of puzzles, so hopefully that'll be entertaining to watch the players butt heads against these puzzles, but exciting stuff, as well as uncovering some ancient mysteries of the world of Theros.
Love to hear that. I actually forgot my own stream, which is coming up tomorrow.
Yes.
That will happen before then, but that is happening on Tuesday. Tomorrow we will be continuing the next leg of the search for the Spellforge, which will be taking the crew to Waterdeep, which is one of my favorite places in all of the Forgotten Realms. Taking all of the information, we talked about making modules serve your own needs. I took all the information from the Waterdeep Dragon Heist scenario and made it my bitch. And now I just have this city full of stuff that has nothing to do with Waterdeep Dragon Heist that I'm going to use and make as a playground for them. And then, Rob, what's coming up on Spelljammer next Wednesday?
They are going to, the name of the episode, not the name of the episode, but in the DM's notes that I totally have read at this point, is called Realm Space Sortie. So I can assume that they're going to not be in a simulation very soon. So yeah, you'll definitely want to tune in for seeing how Captain Aelin takes command of her vessel.
Awesome. The March to Gary Con will soon begin. You see the image up there in the corner. So don't forget to join us for that. Hopefully we'll have some new friends, some Gary Con fans joining us in the very near future. We are still pushing towards our Metal Dice giveaway that we mentioned earlier in the stream. Thank you to everyone who went ahead and contributed to that tonight. Look for us at your local conventions. We are many places this weekend and shall be many places as we go forward into the rest of the month before I get to go to GaryCon. I see a last minute rollies 16. Suck it, Ethan.
Rob got the same role as me, but I got called out. I see.
15.
Got you all. Finally, I win one of these things. I only win them on Eric Braw's channel. Other than announcements for this stream, Dan, Rob, Ethan, anything you want to shout out or anything that you've got going on?
Guys, thanks for coming in and helping make sure we had a stream for tonight. I feel like Wednesday night is my night, and I was like, you know what? Even though not all my players can be here, I wanted to get with some fellow DMs because I gained some knowledge. So thank you guys for coming out.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, just thank you. I really appreciate getting the chance to chat.
Dude, you seem like an all right fella. I like the cut of your jib. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome back anytime. It's all right. It's not on this screen. I have a different camera in your house.
What?
All right, guys.
Just drop that on me.
We are heading for Press X for Awesome. If you have unlocked the Raging Cien Fairy Boy with Flames emoji, go ahead and spam that in their chat when we get there. Just in case you don't hear it anywhere else this week, as always, please remember, we love you guys. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.
See ya.
Later.